Hello, everybody. This is Gail Perry, and I've got one of our star consultants here with me today, Evan Northup. How are you doing, Evan?
I'm doing great today. How are you, Gail?
I'm terrific. And y'all, we have such an exciting topic to talk about, and it is a pain point for so many fundraising shops around, I would say, the world.
Absolutely. It's something that we all kind of deal with. Sometimes we get a little siloed in our positions in fundraising, and this is one of those pain points that I think we've all felt at some point or another.
And here, if this is pain point number 6 in our long series of pain points, and this is no training for major gift officers. So what happens? They fail. No training equals failure. What do you think?
I think it's really important to empower people from the minute that they join your organization. And sometimes, if you come in with experience on the outside, that does not equate to experience with that org itself. And we have some problems that come up.
That's right. And so let's be honest. This is one of the biggest mistakes we ever see in fundraising. You hire a major gift officer and you hand them a portfolio or you work with them to pull out the portfolio and you tell them how much you need to raise, and that's it. You say, okay, run along. Good luck. You've got your portfolio. Just we expect you to raise a lot of money with these names. So there's no step-by-step process. There's no training. And then you're surprised when they don't deliver.
Or surprised that we have a 2-year turnover as the average in our industry. And sometimes the people who run these organizations are just as big contributors as anything else. And so it's really important to understand how vital onboarding and training is to get you somewhere in a good position at whatever organization you're at.
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like dropping somebody in the middle of the ocean with no map and no compass, and then wondering why they didn't swim to shore. And here's the truth though, when you throw somebody into major gift fundraising without training, would you agree, Evan, you're really setting them up to fail?
I think it's so important in our industry. We see it everywhere. Raise your hands by yourself, wherever you're watching this, if you didn't think as a young child that you were going to be a fundraiser when you grow up. It's certainly an industry you kind of fall into, and you all of a sudden realize that you have a passion and drive for it. That doesn't necessarily equate to training. And just like anyone in a profession, we need to be able to hone our skills and get better at what we can be. And often that also lies with the organization itself, helping us to be empowered to be the best frontline fundraiser that we can.
That's right. So this is how it plays out, everybody. First, your brand new major gift officer is enthusiastic. They love the mission. They're eager to connect with donors, but quickly, what happened? They hit a wall because they don't really know which donors of all those are worth their time, and they have too many names and not a way to prioritize. Here's something that I suffered from when I was a beginning fundraiser. They keep the conversation very polite and very social, but they never move toward a gift.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really one of the things you said. I just want to noodle on for a second. Someone coming into your organization has no idea about the institutional history. They have no idea what donors have been there a long time, exactly what they like, what they don't like, their preferred methods of communication. If you're not setting your major gift officer up for immediate success, which is really sitting down and spending a lot of time talking about every single donor that you have, you're not granting them the access that they need to succeed.
That's right. So you've got institutional knowledge, and then you've got knowledge that you learn, that skill set to go choose the right donors and talk with them face to face. And so what happens is that say you've got this brand new fundraiser and they were super enthusiastic, they were very excited about the mission, and they've hit that wall. And the ugly part is that months go by and they're busy, but nothing is moving. And some donors lose interest and drift away. Opportunities might slip away. And pretty soon, leadership starts asking, what is this person doing all day? And the poor fundraiser, they start feeling pressure. They start questioning themselves and they say, am I cut out for this? And just
Mm-hmm.
like I was saying, eventually they leave.
Yeah, and it happens so much faster than you really kind of think. We are as fundraisers expected to just go out and raise money, right? That's so easy. We figured all of this out. But without that direct understanding of what motivates donors, what gets them excited, what is that history, and what are the connections they already have? I mean, I'll tell you a little insider truth. We've seen a lot of CEOs and VPs in our life who hold relationships really, really close. But it's a critically important thing for every nonprofit organization to remember that the best relationships with donors are between the donor and the organization, not the donor and a person. And sometimes you get that when you first get that portfolio is you need to ask who actually owns this relationship so I understand what things are doing moving forward.
That's right. That's a huge issue for a lot of major gift fundraisers that somebody else owns the issue, but they are responsible for the donor. It can be a recipe for confusion. And I want to go back to the whole idea of this poor person who's just started out as a major gift fundraiser, and the leadership is starting to come down, going, "What's going on? Why aren't you being productive?" And there's damage happening here because it's not just about one person not performing. It's donor relationships get dropped, and high potential donors go cold. And then the worst thing of all, though, is that major gift fundraising revenue stalls out for this year and sometimes next year because the right donors are not touched and moved forward. And then, Evan mentioned turnover. Every time a major gift officer leaves, you lose all the trust they built with the donors. You lose the relationships they built. You start from scratch. And hey, Evan, do donors like starting from scratch with a new connection to the organization?
You will hear us say this a million times. It is far easier to keep a donor than to get a donor. And if you lose that momentum, then you're going to have to get them back. And that's way much more work and time and effort than you want to have. You need to be empowering your major gift officers from the day that they start working so that those relationships are as robust as they can possibly be.
That's right. I mean, we've seen organizations spend years digging out of the hole left by just one undertrained, underperforming hire who blundered all the relationships because they didn't have training and onboarding support.
Absolutely. And if you heard what Gail just said, it's because they didn't have training and onboarding support. It's critical for you to really ascertain from the beginning what you need to be teaching your major gifts officer in order to get them to where they need to be. And that's a mutual relationship. And so really you need to make sure from the very beginning, your MGO and your VP or your CEO are in lockstep and are working together. And that is the best way you're going to have fundraising success.
You do not want your major gift officer siloed away. So many people hire somebody and they say, okay, good luck. And they don't want to mess with fundraising. CEOs who are not familiar with fundraising will do that. CFOs will do the same thing. And then it's just so unfortunate because I have coached some young fundraisers, mostly women. They were all women, I think, young women who were starting out in their career, and they landed in the smaller organization that had way too many expectations and not enough, no training, no infrastructure, no know-how, and the organizational culture did not support them.
I really think that this is something that most people experience at some point in their careers
Probably
is
so.
really just getting so excited and then getting lost in what the institutional culture is. We talk a lot about at the Gail Perry Group the culture of philanthropy, and that's everyone understanding what role they have to play at a nonprofit organization in the world of philanthropy. And if your major gift officer is feeling alone and siloed and untrained, you're just going to lose so much traction that will take you years to unravel.
Now I'm feeling so sorry for all these poor lonely major gift officers all of a sudden. But this is a word from your sponsor. One of the main reason we're doing these pain points of major gift fundraising in the month of August 2020 is that we are launching a wonderful brand new training and coaching program for the individual fundraiser. It's called the Major Gift Officer Boot Camp. And if you want to learn how to be successful in talking to donors, having conversations, opening gift conversations and closing gifts, understanding your portfolio management and how to find the most likely prospects, how to get the appointment, how to move forward with the relationship. And we're also adding a session, Evan, which is really going to be fun, managing up.
Yep, this is the teaser for that, because that's to me as someone who was a frontline fundraiser for 15 years.
That's right.
We all have a lot of perspectives and some really good advice and strategies on how to manage upwards.
That's right. In fact, Catherine Gamble is also presenting that webinar, and she has a special presentation called The Boss Whisperer.
I wish I had that 15 years ago.
Me too. Me went 30 years ago for me, maybe. But I really want to encourage everybody watching the video to check out the Major Gift Officer Boot Camp. It may not be for you, but then it may be just for you. It's live. It's not one of those pre-recorded things that gives you your CFRE hours later. You get to actually talk to us. And our entire consulting team at Gail Perry Group is going to be involved in the presenting and in the group coaching calls. So we'd love to work with you and help you identify the right people and close more gifts. And so that's our sort of our solution for the pain point, in a way that there's not enough training, Evan. But let's give people more advice.
Yeah, get some roadmaps and
And
some real tips and tricks. We definitely know that misaligned expectations from the beginning can lead to some real pain points that people are having. Leadership makes a lot of assumptions that you can come in ready to fundraise, but they also need to give you that tools, that knowledge, that donor history access, case for support materials from the past, anything that really kind of takes you out of flipping through binders of information and getting it directly from the source, which is your leadership.
And it's always helpful to bring the leadership in to try to evaluate some of your prospects, especially if you're new or if you have a new prospect. Like Evan has mentioned a couple of times, you really want to gather all the internal information about the donor, and perhaps everything you can find out in your CRM about the donor. And then you want to try to qualify the donor's true potential, so you know whether to spend your time on this lovely person or whether you need to bless and release them and go to the next person on your list.
Definitely is something to keep in mind. A tip that I always like to have whenever I started a new organization is make sure that your leadership introduces you to your donor pool, whether that is phone calls, an email, whatever it is. If you are working in a major gift capacity, having that person open the door for you allows you to already start relationship building right from the very, very beginning. And then all of a sudden you're empowered to go off and continue that relationship on your own. But it really helps having that support right from the beginning.
That's right. And Evan, you shared a thought with me that I think is so interesting, and it's the sink or swim culture that drives ineffective fundraising. Talk to us a little bit more about that, because we've talked a little bit about it from the major gift officer standpoint of just being thrust out there and told to go to work with no idea no idea about what to do, anything. What happens when you've got sink or swim going on?
You're really having your major gift officer focus on the things that are unimportant, which is trying to check some boxes when it comes to how many phone calls you've made and how many meetings you set up. But that really kind of doesn't allow them to have transformational fundraising. It really doesn't, it's kind of pigeonholes them into transactional fundraising. And that is something that we are always working to get away from. You do not want donors to feel like they just handed you off to a new person so they can open their checkbooks. You want them to be opened up to building new relationships, and you have to allow them to do that. So sink or swim, if you're not helping them, they're going to sink. And if you do help them, it is that rising tide that will raise all ships. And those donor relationships are really going to be safeguarded and in good hands.
Well, Evan and I recorded another video earlier about what happens when you have pressure to ask too quickly. It shifts it more into the transactional conversation rather than the transformational, or it doesn't honor the donor relationship. And that, again, is part of the sink or swim culture when leadership doesn't really understand major gift fundraising, which is why leadership needs their own course, I think, so that they know they can understand the timing involved in a key major donor relationship.
I was told by my very first major gift vice president, it takes 2 years for you to find the bathroom. And that's really just code for it takes years to build long-term relationships that result in major gifts. We are not talking about annual giving. We're not talking about event giving. We're talking about those transformational major gifts that take months and months and months, if not years and years, to really cultivate properly. So if your leadership doesn't give you that time, you will have decreased revenue. You will have missed opportunities. You will have additional expenses that are sort of aligned with turnover and recruitment because you aren't being given the bandwidth to do things in the right way.
That's right. And so this is really a leadership issue that results in underperformance and frustration of your poor, beleaguered major gift people, and high turnover, as we've mentioned several times, and the lost donor opportunities and relationships. You miss I think the biggest cost to a lack of training of a major gift officer is the missed revenue opportunities.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really something that from the beginning, whenever we start a new position, we're so excited and we're ready to go and we want to hit every goal out the park. But it's important to have achievable stretch, but achievable goals that you map out with your leadership from the very beginning. You are not going to go out and raise twice as much as anyone else has ever been able to raise without a lot of this institutional knowledge and support that only your leadership can guide you. So sitting down with them and managing reasonable expectations from the beginning will set you up for longer term success.
A lot of people who are not experienced or don't have any background in major gifts don't know how to talk about reasonable expectations. You agree to the metrics that are imposed upon you or that are given to you because you don't know any better. And also you don't really have a support group or any other colleagues to really fall back on and ask what's reasonable. Because fundraising is really a learned skill. Evan, don't you think that's the number one thing we're trying to drive home?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important to also find your network of people, right? And that's one of the other reasons we're doing this boot camp is because it can feel really isolating if there's no one else at your organization who is a trained fundraising professional. It's also important to keep up your own training at all time. There's always new information, there's always new skill sets, and there's a lot of different things you can learn by talking with other people in the same industry who are experiencing some of the same pain points so that you can figure out how to navigate those roadblocks at your organization.
Absolutely. And we support major gift officers as much as we possibly can. One of the things we love doing with them when we're coaching or working in a consulting capacity is helping them identify their most promising donors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love doing this step and creating the strategy around the ask. And sometimes there's a scenario, and sometimes you need an influencer, and sometimes you need an introducer, or certain timing has to happen before you really ask. And all it's very subtle. And these are they say the art and science of major gift
Mm-hmm.
fundraising. This is the art side of we teach emotional and social intelligence for fundraisers in this program as well. So we think you need the more training you have, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah, and sometimes that's also that subtle training of managing up, which we're definitely going to be covering because it's how you setting yourself up for success. So a couple things just in your first 3 months that you might want to think about doing when you start a new position. You want to
Mhm.
make sure you have access to donor data. You want to make sure you have access to all existing fundraising, language, and communications. You want to see if there's anything that you know about impact storytelling. And just as Gail's talking about, a really great solicitation often involves multiple people and doing some role playing to help them understand what their job is so that perhaps maybe your program manager is terrified of fundraising that hasn't done anything. But if you show them that's your job, and all they'd have to do is talk about the program and the impact that a donation makes, then all of a sudden you're a team and you can do that together. You do that from the beginning at an organization, and you're already building a culture of trust and philanthropy that will serve you better throughout your job.
And so what you're really talking about is internal relationships and communication in order to build trust and credibility for the Major Gift Initiative. That is also, and I think having training, everybody has always said whenever they take one of our trainings that one of the major results for their inside themselves is confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence to lead up, confidence to pick up a donor and pick up a phone or email and handle a donor situation, confidence to educate your peers and your colleagues on how all this stuff works.
And this will really help you get there. So just take a couple of the tips and tricks that we talked about today, some things you can do right from the get-go, your internal structure, your external relationship building, and that will certainly help you bridge the gap between sometimes a lack of training that we all face.
That's right. And so we would like to tell everybody that there is good news in this pain point and it's completely fixable because we've seen fundraisers go from lost and hesitant to confident and closing major gifts in just a few months. Once they got the right training, built their confidence, and understood how to find the right donors and move them into the gift conversation.
I've seen it happen firsthand many times over the last few years is really when you give someone the right tips, when the right training, it is amazing to see someone all of a sudden become empowered to go and make those big asks and close them and bring success for them and the organization.
That's right. And so remember, that's exactly why we created the Major Gifts Officer Boot Camp, live hands-on training for Major Gift Officers and their leaders. No guessing, no more guessing, no more winging it. You'll get a proven plan for qualifying the right donors, leading purposeful conversations. I love that word, purposeful, and then closing transformational gifts. So, because we think that when you give your major gift officers the tools to succeed, they don't just survive, they win, and they win big, and your institution wins, your people you serve wins, your mission wins. Hooray.
We will figure it out together. We have roadmaps and we will walk along this path with you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear your comments, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.